When John was young, there was a woman he loved. The day Sophie returned to the country after her divorce, I was forgotten in a downpour. That afternoon, I borrowed an umbrella from a passing janitor and headed to the airport, buying a ticket for the earliest available flight. Anywhere would do, as long as it was far from John and Sophie. At 6 p.m., John's car pulled into the driveway. The housekeeper greeted him instead of Emily. It suddenly occurred to him that he'd been so preoccupied with Sophie's situation that he'd forgotten to pick Emily up from the grocery store. Not that it mattered, his wife had always been gentle and understanding, never one to fuss over such trivial matters. By 7 p.m., the rain had stopped but darkness lingered. Emily still hadn't returned. John felt an inexplicable unease creeping in. He called 3 times, the first went unanswered. The next 2 straight to voicemail. The storm had erupted without warning, the sky turning black in an instant. I huddled under a store awning, watching rain pound the pavement. An hour earlier, John had promised to drive me home. Now there was no sign of him. Other women taking shelter were gradually collected by partners holding umbrellas at careful angles. I imagined John doing the same for Sophie right now, the woman he'd loved in his youth. The one fate kept pulling him toward. They said Sophie's marriage had been miserable. During her 3-month divorce proceedings, her mother passed away. John had spent nights pacing their bedroom, sighing over her misfortunes. Today marked Sophie's triumphant return, divorce finalized, plane touching down on home soil. He'd dressed meticulously that morning in a custom-tailored suit, the tie patterned with subtle datura flowers. I'd managed every detail of his wardrobe since our wedding. Yet that particular tie wasn't my choosing. Raindrops clattered like castanets. Strangely, my racing thoughts stilled. "Ma'am?" I waved at the street sweeper, trading my freshly bought seafood for her battered umbrella. I smiled at her delighted reaction. The worn fabric could still keep out storms, more than I could say for unreliable men. Hailing a cab outside the market, I didn't realize until reaching the airport that I had nowhere to go. My only remaining relative was Grandma. But showing up at her door would mean explaining my heartache. In the end, I chose the next departing flight. Any destination would do, as long as it held no traces of John or Sophie. For 3 years of marriage, Sophie had permeated our lives like oxygen, unseen yet inescapable. I was done holding my breath. As I approached the boarding gate, my phone buzzed with John's caller ID. Letting it ring out, I finally blocked his number when the screen went dark. John Wilson arrived home at 6 o'clock. When his car pulled into the driveway, only the housekeeper came out to greet him. He paused while removing his suit jacket, then draped it over his arm instead of handing it to the staff. "Where's Emily?" "Mrs. Johnson hasn't returned yet." John froze mid-step. He suddenly remembered Emily had impulsively decided to visit the seafood market earlier. He'd promised to pick her up afterward. But Sophie Miller had collapsed in tears at her mother's gravesite. He'd rushed Sophie to the hospital and completely forgotten about Emily. Glancing at the torrential rain outside, John felt a twinge of guilt. Was Emily upset? The thought barely formed before he shook his head with a faint smile. No one possessed more gentle patience than his wife. She'd never get angry over such trivial matters. "Sir, you're soaked. Perhaps you should take a hot bath," the housekeeper suggested quietly. John nodded. "Let Emily know I'll be upstairs when she gets back." The steaming bath failed to relax him. Emerging from the bathroom with sniffles, he searched unsuccessfully for the medicine cabinet. His watch showed nearly 7. The rain had stopped, but darkness pressed heavily against the windows. He dialed Emily's number. The line rang endlessly before disconnecting. John frowned. She'd never missed his calls before. Maybe traffic delays from the storm? His chest tightened as he redialed. This time, the call didn't connect at all. On the 3rd attempt, his knuckles whitened around the phone. A quick online search revealed the bitter truth: blocked numbers can't reach their recipients. John barked a humorless laugh. He'd been too hasty praising Emily's endless patience. The plane landed in an unfamiliar city past midnight. As phone service resumed, Multiple notifications flooded in. One set of texts from an unknown number caught his attention. Hello, Emily. This is Sophie. I heard about your fight with John because of me. And that you haven't returned home. I'm truly sorry. Let me clarify, John had feelings for me years ago. But we've always seen each other as siblings. I never meant to come between you two. No one wants John's happiness more than I do. Emily. After receiving my text, could you please call John back? Or at least let us know you're safe. I found it laughable. If they were truly concerned about my safety, there were countless ways. With the Wilson family's resources, accessing my identification details would have been effortless. Yet after I left home, the first person searching for me wasn't the police. It was Sophie. I loathed how every ripple in my life reached Sophie's ears. I didn't respond. But she persisted relentlessly. Eventually calling. I answered. Dead air lingered before a soft chuckle broke through. So you're not the St. John made you out to be. Sophie's voice dripped through the receiver. 3 years of marriage before finally causing a scene. Impressive restraint. Emily. She paused. Then continued silkily, since you're voluntarily vacating the position, I'll make sure John gives you extra alimony. I laughed. Given Miss Miller's own extensive divorce settlement experience, I'll trust your expertise. If the payout's good, coffee's on me. I hung up, blocked the number, and activated all spam filters. Day 3 of Emily's disappearance. John stood on the sprawling terrace, crimson sunset staining his knuckles white around the phone. His grandmother's voice crackled through, no need for Emily to visit, I'm fine here. That cross-continental flight's too much hassle. The blood-orange sun dipped lower, dragging his hopes with it. Emily had no other family. He'd been certain she'd sought refuge there. His gaze drifted to her vanity. Impeccably organized as always. Except for the hairbrush left askew. Strands of raven hair shimmered in the fading light, Emily's crowning glory. Never touched by dyes or heat styling. Sophie's second call jolted him. John? The roses in your garden have wilted. Her honeyed tone belied the barb. Tell your landscaper to remove them. Such an eyesore. No. The refusal startled them both. Are you angry with me? Her breath hitched theatrically. This is your and Emily's home. Of course you decide. That's not what I meant, Sophie. His throat constricted around the childhood endearment. Any news about Emily? Nothing. This is all my fault. I never should have returned, sobs punctuated her words. John stared at the dying roses. Irritation flaring. Emily rarely cried. The last time he'd seen her tears was when their golden retriever passed. Now her absence screamed louder than any weeping. The only time she cried in his arms was on their wedding night. Overwhelmed by the pain. Then during their first year of marriage. He missed her birthday. If memory served. It happened because Sophie's husband had been abusive. And he'd rushed overseas in a panic. John found himself inexplicably agitated. 3 years of marriage. Yet I'd never known Emily could be this stubborn and willful. I sat on the edge of our bed, deliberating before calling her only close friend. The friend expressed surprise, confirming she hadn't heard from Emily. She wasn't visiting her city either. My hand trembled slightly as I ended the call. I lit a cigarette but didn't smoke it. Emily had always been particular about cleanliness. When she was home, not a single corner of the house carried any lingering odors. My phone rang again, an unknown landline. Normally I'd ignore it. But this time I answered immediately. Hello? My voice shook. John. It's me. Emily. When her familiar voice came through, the usually reserved man found himself snapping with uncharacteristic sharpness. Emily. You're not a child anymore. Do you think pulling a runaway stunt is appropriate for someone your age? Have you considered how this could damage the Wilson family's reputation? I'm sorry. I loosened my tie. The crushing weight on my chest inexplicably lifting. Come home now and we'll forget this happened. I said, softening my tone. I need to discuss something else. What is it? I sent you something. It should arrive today. Why mail it? Just bring it when you. I'm not coming back. Her voice remained calm as ever. Please check the delivery. If you have no objections after reviewing it, sign the documents. I'll call again in 2 days. This isn't my number, so don't try calling back. What are you implying? The momentary relief evaporated. John. Her exhale carried through the receiver. These 3 years as your wife, they haven't made me happy. Let's get divorced. Silence stretched between us. Emily waiting with polite patience. Where are you right now? That doesn't matter. I glanced at the deepening twilight beyond the window. Emily. What childish game are you playing? The line stayed quiet except for what might have been a faint, sad chuckle before the call disconnected. John immediately redialed the number on instinct. The voice that answered belonged to an unfamiliar middle-aged woman speaking a dialect he couldn't comprehend. After apologizing and hanging up, he sat motionless as dusk thickened around him. For 3 years of marriage, Emily had been like perpetually lukewarm water, never angry, always soft-spoken. Everyone adored her, praised her. He'd nearly forgotten their marriage originated from intergenerational obligations. The woman who'd secured her position as Wilson family's daughter-in-law through such trivial favors couldn't possibly be as guileless as she appeared. John moved to the vanity, dropping the hairbrush he'd been clutching. His reflection showed furrowed brows and smoldering anger, emotions he never displayed. This trivial matter had breached his composure twice today, resetting his expression to its usual impassivity. He descended the stairs. Sophie called to him from the living room. He acknowledged her with a nod, instructing staff to bring that day's delivered packages. Selecting Emily's envelope, he tore it open. Sophie gasped softly beside him as he shredded the divorce papers into the trash. John, she grasped his sleeve, voice honeyed with concern. Don't be angry. Emily must be acting impulsively. She's always been so gracious and reasonable. This is my fault. If I hadn't returned from abroad, hadn't asked for your help. What's that to do with you? His tone frosted. She's being childish. Childishness you indulged. Sophie's smile strained. Even overseas. I heard about your marital bliss. Tears spilled as her voice broke. John sneered. Why I married her if others don't know. Surely you do? Was it really because of me? Her tearful gaze held his. He withdrew his arm without answering. Should I have the driver take you home? Or will you stay? I'll wait here. She dabbed her eyes. With things so tense between you and Emily, I couldn't sleep anyway. After instructing staff to prepare the guest room and summon his car, John departed. Sophie watched him leave, then stared at the shredded documents. Her lips pressed thin as she settled on the sofa. Why had he torn up the divorce papers? He showed no intention of ending this marriage. The answer chilled her. Finding someone meant nothing to John. Everything depended on whether he wanted to look. So when I saw John waiting outside the boutique hotel, I wasn't particularly surprised. The early autumn breeze ruffled his ash-gray trench coat as he leaned against the car hood, cigarette smoke curling around his sharp features. His arresting height and movie star looks always drew attention, making my own appearance seem painfully ordinary in comparison. Unkempt hair tied with a scrunchie. No makeup. Wearing a shapeless linen dress and carrying reusable grocery bags like some housekeeper from the Wilson estate. During our first year of marriage, this contrast used to shrivel my confidence. But time had hardened me like sea glass. Our mismatch had been obvious from the beginning. Like serving street food at a Michelin-starred restaurant. John stubbed out his cigarette, his expression as inscrutable as ever. I set down the grocery bags, digging into my palms. He checked his platinum wristwatch. Pack your essentials. 30 minutes should suffice. Did you sign the papers? I held out my hand. Give me the divorce agreement and I'll come finalize it. Those cold gray eyes darkened fractionally. Announcing our separation now would be ill-timed. Then we'll keep it quiet. Just file the paperwork. Emily. His mouth twisted with familiar mockery. You always had impeccable timing. But you should know better than to try manipulating me. I studied the man I'd shared a bed with for 3 years. Men compartmentalize sex and love so easily. Women drown trying. That storm years ago never chilled my skin. But it left my heart perpetually waterlogged. John would never understand, he'd never loved me enough to learn. If you sign, I'll attend the anniversary gala with you next week. Full corporate spouse act. Whatever PR needs. My smile could have melted butter. There's no downside for you, John. After endless seconds, he nodded. After the gala, I'll sign. I didn't return with him that day. Instead, I flew back the night before the event, playing my part until curtain fall. For appearances, his black Maybach collected me from the airport, delivering me to the penthouse we'd once shared. Sophie greeted me at the porte-cochere like the lady of the house. Emmy, thank God you're here. Her manicured hands clutched mine, eyes glistening with expertly timed tears. Every detail screamed quiet luxury cashmere lounge set. Diamond studs. No makeup. The perfect society hostess. I withdrew my hand, leaving her clutching empty air. Sophie Miller had beautifully manicured nails, and her fair fingers were adorned with a gemstone ring and a diamond band. My own hands bore nothing, not even the wedding band I'd long removed, just a faint callus on my palm. When I first learned of Sophie's existence, I'd foolishly compared myself to her in secret. Now, no matter how exquisite her beauty or elegance, my heart remained undisturbed. I didn't glance at her or acknowledge her greeting, simply clutching my bag as I walked past. She bit her lip awkwardly. A servant approached. Mrs. Johnson, let me carry that for you. No thank you. I smiled, sidestepping the offer. The maid glanced uncertainly at John. Let her be. John turned toward the main house without me. Instead, I headed for the guest annex. Emily. John's voice hardened with anger. My public disregard had humiliated both him and Sophie before the staff. I kept walking, silent. Our anniversary gala couldn't end soon enough. After tonight, perhaps this marriage might finally conclude. We entered the ballroom arm-in-arm during the festivities' peak. He played the doting husband flawlessly, fingers interlaced with mine as we mingled. His warm glances and my demure smiles mirrored our years of practiced performance. Yet where my smiles once held genuine affection, they'd become hollow gestures. I despised this charade, this version of him and myself. Near evening's end, the sharp brine of sashimi triggered sudden nausea. I barely reached the restroom before retching violently. Darkness swallowed me as I stood. I awoke in a hospital room crowded with Wilsons. John clasped my hand, uncharacteristic joy softening his features. Emmy, you're pregnant. 6 weeks along. His tender tone startled me. I'd witnessed such warmth only during his rare meetings with Sophie. 3 years of marriage had taught me his gentleness toward her stemmed from love. What little kindness he'd shown me before hadn't been for my sake. Now, even this momentary softness belonged not to me, but to the life I carried. Grandma already knows about your pregnancy. John gripped my hand, the smile at the corner of his lips softening. I've sent someone to bring her over. She was overjoyed, cried from excitement during our call. Lying in bed, I suddenly felt tears spill over too. 3 childless years of marriage had been Grandma's greatest worry. What she never knew was that John had claimed he didn't want children, insisting we enjoy our newlywed years first. He'd always been meticulous about contraception. So why this sudden elation now? After the Wilson family left, the hospital room fell silent. John brought me a glass of water. Let's not talk about divorce anymore. Focus on resting and nurturing the baby. I pushed the lukewarm cup away. I don't want this child. Not a flicker of emotion crossed John's face as he looked down at me. Tell Grandma yourself then. If you can bear making her grieve in her twilight years. He knew I'd choose suffering over worrying Grandma. But he'd forgotten. My grandmother had ripped off her foot-binding cloths to defy her parents in youth. She'd broken engagements, fled thousands of miles to seek refuge with relatives. When her husband succumbed to opium, she divorced him and smuggled away their only daughter. Now frail and gentle, I knew better. If Grandma learned the truth about John and me, she'd support whatever decision I made. John cleared his corporate schedule to hover over me constantly. News of my anniversary gala collapse and subsequent pregnancy had leaked everywhere. Reporters swarming the hospital perimeter. The Wilson family's ostentatious convoy during my discharge drew envious whispers. Everyone marveled at the former nobody who'd married into wealth, now basking in doting in-laws and impending motherhood. How laughable. This world measuring women's worth by men's bestowed tokens. No one saw the riptides beneath my picture-perfect surface. Sophie had left Beijing permanently at her grandparents' insistence. In the car, John gripped my hand. I told you from the start, what Sophie and I share isn't romantic. We grew up together. She bears the scar from saving me as children. I cherished her then. But now she's like family. Emily, you're being unreasonable about this. Still, his palm slid to my shoulder, pulling me toward him. No more private meetings. Let's put this behind us. We'll raise our child properly, a complete family. For a heartbeat, I almost believed him. They say pregnancy hormones make women protective of the life growing within. These past days, I'd wavered endlessly. My grandmother once told me, a husband can belong to someone else, but children will always be yours. Truthfully, in that moment, I considered it. Maybe discovering this pregnancy was heaven giving John and me one last chance. No woman wants to end her child's life. I'm no exception. But as I wavered, Sophie found a way to contact me. Do you know why John suddenly stopped using protection 6 months ago? I froze, realizing it had indeed started around then. He'd abandoned all precautions. Because that's when I decided to divorce him. Sophie continued with a bitter laugh that carried both mockery and despair. Emily, I'm infertile. If I could bear children, do you think John would have ever settled for marrying you? Now do you understand how your baby came to exist? It's only paving the way for my future that this child gets to see daylight. I wasn't supposed to tell you yet. The plan was to wait until after delivery. But Emily, her voice crackled with scorching jealousy. I changed my mind. I'd rather destroy this path than watch you birth John's child. Sitting motionless, icy numbness spread from my soles to my scalp. Yet no tears came, only strange, weightless relief. I felt every emotional tether to John silently dissolve. What if I insist on keeping this baby anyway? You won't. Her certainty rang cruel. You appear gentle and patient, but your eyes tolerate no imperfections. I surprised myself by laughing. Thank you for telling me this. Sophie. Don't hate me. Emily. You know love makes us selfish. Blind. I hung up and walked to the window. Twilight revealed the garden where nearly all roses had fallen. A sharp breeze shook the last clinging bloom from its thorny perch. Petals sinking into mud. Blossoms withered. Dreams dissolved. On their final shared dinner, Emily wore a mint green dress that tugged John's memory. Their first meeting flashed before him. She'd worn similar attire when he'd arrived intent on rejecting her. Back then, defeated by family pressures after Sophie's overseas marriage, he'd prepared cruel excuses to send this Johnson family candidate away. But before he could voice them, her brimming tears had disarmed him. John had never seen a girl cry so much. Her large eyes pooled with tears that took forever to spill over. When they finally did, they fell in rapid succession down her cheeks. I'm so sorry. She choked out between hiccuping breaths. I truly didn't realize you were forced into this meeting. I'll tell my family immediately to cancel our engagement. She kept apologizing even as coffee splashed across her mint green dress from her clumsy movements, the stains spreading like watercolor blooms. Emily ducked her head to wipe at the mess, crystalline drops still slipping past her lashes. Something about the way her shoulders shook made his chest tighten unexpectedly, perhaps the bitter aftertaste of his own unrequited love for Sophie, the woman who'd chosen another. What's your name? Emily. Right? The words left his mouth before he could reconsider. When she nodded, still avoiding his gaze, he leaned back in the cave chair with practiced nonchalance. Want to marry me then? Her head snapped up, doe eyes widening behind tear-clumped lashes. But you just said. John let his most charming smirk surface, the one that made society columnists swoon. Just teasing. Emmy. Don't go tattling to Grandma Wilson. All right? The tips of her ears flushed coral as she shook her head vehemently, fingers twisting the coffee-stained fabric of her skirt. 3 months later, they exchanged rings at the Wilson estate. 7 months after that, Emily walked down the aisle in ivory satin. Now 3 years into their marriage, she moved through their penthouse kitchen preparing dinner, her baby bump just beginning to show beneath the apron ties. John stared at the sonogram photo on his desk, the grainy image suddenly making his throat constrict. This pregnancy had been meticulously planned, yet the reality felt disorientingly tender. Would their child inherit Emily's maple syrup eyes? The thought ambushed him like sunlight breaking through storm clouds, warm and alarming in equal measure. His original blueprint had been coldly practical: produce an heir, eventually transition the child to Sophie's care once circumstances allowed. But these days, he caught himself wondering if their nursery should be painted sunflower yellow instead of navy blue. The more Emily's laughter filled their home, the less he could stomach his own calculations. That evening, she served roasted chicken with rosemary potatoes, her pregnancy glow outshining the crystal chandelier. For the first time in weeks, she'd kept dinner down. John watched her tuck a loose curl behind one ear, the simple gesture making his chest ache. The terrifying truth settled over him as they cleared the dishes. He no longer wanted to regain control. This freefall felt suspiciously like falling in love. So he let her be. She even accompanied him in drinking a small amount of fruit wine safe for pregnancy. When slightly intoxicated, he noticed Emily looked particularly radiant. Are you wearing makeup? Just a touch. The lip color suits you. Thank you. Her eyes crinkled with a smile. He smiled back, rising to stand behind her chair, hands resting on either armrest. John bent down, his straight nose grazing her thick hairline in an intimate gesture. Shall I have the staff move your belongings back to the master bedroom? She neither nodded nor refused, simply raising her glass to clink against his. Later, he walked her through the garden. Under the moonlit sky, wilted rose petals dusted the lawn like faded velvet. She moved silently through the autumn breeze that played with her skirt's hem. Following behind, John suddenly felt intoxicated anew by the scene's tranquil domesticity. Whether she returned to the master suite that night remained unclear in his memory. He slept deeply until noon the next day. Reaching across empty bedsheets, he murmured Emily. The throbbing hangover made sitting up arduous. The bedroom echoed with absence, a single pillow occupying the king-sized bed. She hadn't come. What John didn't yet realize was this: not just that night, but every night thereafter. Emily would never again set foot in this place. When I emerged from surgery, Grandma waited to take me home. Though bundled in heavy coats, I shivered uncontrollably. As anesthesia wore off, dull pain radiated from my abdomen. Grandma pressed a hot water bottle against me, clasping my hand. Let's go home, Emmy. Her spine curved with age, knees bent, yet her grip remained firm, an anchor giving me courage to move forward. I warned the Wilsons we wanted no repayment debts. Mismatched marriages bring sorrow, and Grandma knows this better than most. Her voice thickened. I don't blame anyone now. Only ache for you. Leaning into her shoulder, I teased, if you feel sorry for me, make your egg custard. I've missed it terribly. I'll make it daily from now on, she promised. Arm in arm, noon sunlight finally brought warmth to my bones. At the hospital entrance, John's car materialized. He emerged tight-jawed, lips pressed white. Grandma instinctively moved to shield me, but I gently shook my head. John strode over to me, his hands gripping my shoulders. Emily, where's the baby? Gone. How dare you? His fingers dug into my flesh as his face turned ashen, storm clouds gathering in his eyes. How could you? Emily? I peeled his fingers off one by one. Sign the divorce papers quickly. I won't divorce you. His voice dropped to Arctic levels. I arched an eyebrow. Then we'll go to court. Unless you want our perfect marriage facade becoming dinner table gossip. His phone interrupted us with Sophie's ringtone. As he answered, panic flashed across his features. I'm coming now. Wait here, he commanded, already moving toward the door. We need to finish this. But I went straight to Mrs. Wilson instead. Without embellishment. I repeated every poisonous word Sophie had whispered about reviving her romance with John. The steel-spined matriarch who'd once exiled Sophie to a loveless marriage abroad listened impassively. She'd never warmed to me. Though she'd softened when learning of her grandchild. Now that hope was gone. 3 days later. Lawyers swarmed the Wilson estate. By week's end. The divorce decree bore our signatures. Sophie's suicide attempt made society pages when the Millers forced her into another arranged marriage. Rumor claimed Mrs. Wilson had frozen the family's credit lines until they complied. I traced the newspaper headline with satisfaction. Some called me cruel. But I'd learned from the best you don't show mercy to those who show none. Let the backstabbers choke on their own schemes while I rebuild my life. Karma's blade cuts sharpest when wielded by wounded hands. John stayed at the hospital with her for a full day and night. I heard he'd gone mad insisting on marrying Sophie. Mrs. Wilson slapped him twice across the face, threatening to disown him. But none of this concerned me anymore. I returned to the small county town 1,000 miles away with Grandma. We renovated her courtyard house thoroughly, planning to fill it with climbing roses come spring. During my recovery from miscarriage, John unexpectedly showed up. Grandma kept the courtyard gate locked. He lingered outside until midnight before leaving. At dawn when I went to fetch milk, he reappeared. The early winter chill had him shivering in his thin overcoat while I bundled up in Grandma's quilted robe. See how we've always existed in separate worlds? Neighbors gawked at the strikingly handsome, well-dressed stranger. Our humble town rarely saw such polished gentlemen. I averted my gaze after one glance. Young Emily had been dazzled by his pretty face, foolishly marrying without hesitation. But marriage reveals its true temperature sip by sip. I'd made my choices and accepted their consequences. John followed silently as I collected milk, bought breakfast, and turned homeward. Only at the courtyard entrance did he speak. Emmy. I kept walking, pushing through the gate. As I turned to close it, he blocked the entrance with his arm. Emmy, Sophie's getting married next spring. The warm milk hit his face before I realized I'd thrown it. His outrageously expensive coat and cashmere sweater dripped white. Emily. He snapped, brows furrowed. If you were the groom, John, I might still respect you. But clearly you don't love her enough to forfeit the Wilson inheritance for her. Emily's accusation held partial truth. He didn't love Sophie deeply, not because of the family fortune, but because his youthful passion for her had long faded. When Emily became pregnant, John had contemplated building a proper family, burying his shameful past indiscretions forever. That night abroad when pity drove him across boundaries with Sophie, that impulsive promise of parenthood and marriage, he'd regretted it almost immediately. But Sophie told Emily. Then Emily terminated the pregnancy without hesitation. When John learned their child was gone, John Wilson had only one thought in his heart: he couldn't keep Emily anymore. Like rose petals scattering to the ground, some things once fallen could never be retrieved. Yet their marital home remained saturated with her presence. Servants still slipped into calling her Mrs. Wilson during daily chatter, habitually referencing what Mrs. Wilson preferred or how Mrs. Wilson would have arranged this. He'd catch himself too, returning home at 6 sharp each evening, though rationally knowing she'd long departed. Some stubborn part of him still anticipated seeing her silhouette materialize in the foyer. Emily had always seemed like tepid 45 degrees Celsius water to him, comfortingly constant yet easily overlooked. Until dehydration taught him water's true necessity. Their final dinner together haunted him. The way golden champagne bubbles had danced in her glass. That particular shade of rosewood lipstick complementing her smile. During their twilight walk afterward, had he simply reached for her hand, pulled her into an embrace, whispered sweetheart against her hair, would she have softened? Given them another chance? The rainstorm memory tortured him worst. That crucial evening when he'd forgotten to pick her up. Had he arrived promptly? Windshield wipers fighting the downpour. Would their story have rewritten itself? Move forward. He now commanded himself. Emily remained single. rejecting countless suitors. She'd loved him fiercely once. He visited her 2 or 3 times yearly, clinging to residual hope. During his 9th visit, the script flipped. Torrential rain mirrored that fateful night's storm. But this time different. A sedan sliced through the rain curtain, stopping precisely at her office awning. Emily moved to dash through the deluge, but the driver urgently waved her back. John watched through rivulets on his windshield as the man emerged umbrella-less, dress shirt plastered to his torso within seconds. Only after securing the umbrella did he approach, sheltering Emily completely during 3 crucial steps to the car. The wiper's rhythmic swishing couldn't clear John's blurred vision as Emily's car vanished into the storm. Years too late. The forgotten rainstorm from their past now drenched him completely. A humorless laugh escaped John as he turned the ignition. The windshield wipers continued their futile dance, like metronomes counting lost chances as he drove away from the woman who'd finally found shelter elsewhere. The car shot through the torrential rain like an arrow released from its bow. In that fleeting moment, John could almost see the youthful face of Emily from their engagement days. Back then, his mother had disapproved of her, but his grandmother doted on the girl. During their engagement party, Grandma had patted Emily's hand saying, "Now Emmy, if John ever gives you trouble, you come straight to me. I'll set this rascal straight." That's why whenever young Emily flushed crimson from his teasing, she'd always threaten, "I'm telling Grandma." With mock indignation, John chuckled at the memory. Rain streaking the car windows like tears. His mind drifted to their wedding night, how she'd wept from the pain until he soothed her with jokes about her famous threat. "Where's Grandma's protection now?" he'd teased, only to have her bite his shoulder in flustered retaliation before melting into his kiss. The windshield wipers thumped like a failing heartbeat as realization struck. He'd loved Emily since their first meeting at that campus mixer, her laugh ringing clearer than wind chimes. But people always sigh over fallen petals, never truly appreciating roses in full bloom. 2 years after their divorce, the climbing roses they'd planted at their marital home had withered. Yet halfway across the country, Grandma's courtyard was bursting with those same flowers, their fragrance now as lost to him as Emily's smile. John tilted his head back sharply against the headrest, throat burning. The storm mirrored the chaos in his chest, this delusion of control, this pathetic need to conceal tears she'd never witness again. Somewhere under clearer skies, Emily was rebuilding her life. And he'd become a spectator in his own story, choking on rose thorns of his own making.